I think saying yes actually ruined my life for a while. Not in a dramatic way. I didn't end up homeless or join a cult. But I did become emotionally exhausted from agreeing to literally everything. I think many of you here have probably heard of Yes Man, a movie about a man who learns to say yes to everything and how that decision completely changes his life. But while watching it, I realized something. We always talk about the power of saying yes. But what happens when yes stops feeling like freedom and starts becoming something driven by fear? What happens when you don't know how to say no? You knew you shouldn't have, yet you still do it again and again. And slowly, this habit turns into a cycle, and not a great one. And for the longest time, that was my cycle. For the longest time, saying no felt like a crime, that it would disappoint people, push them away, or change the way they saw me. I was terrified of being viewed as someone useless or unreliable. So I said, yes, 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 every single time. With my friends, I said yes to everything. Not always because I wanted to, but because I feared what no might cost me. And somehow, those two letters felt heavier than anything else that could come out of my mouth. Something more than just a word. Something that felt powerful enough to change relationships. Even with something as simple as, can we talk? I couldn't say no. Even if I had a test the next day or I was completely exhausted. So I said yes. Yes to this and yes to that. And in my mind, saying no meant you're a bad person. You're not being a good friend. And that feeling, that guilt, it stays with you all the time. It even followed me home. If my parents asked me for something, anything, let's go grocery shopping, let's go wash the car, can you help your brother with homework? Yes, yes, and yes. Even when I just needed time to myself, I couldn't. And slowly, this pressure didn't just affect me emotionally. It started affecting me physically and mentally as well. I constantly felt drained, stressed, and overwhelmed, and I didn't even understand why. But it was because I was giving my energy to everyone else and left nothing for myself. Yes, it gave them satisfaction. But did it give me any? No. Over time, this started consuming me. I stopped knowing what I wanted because I was always so focused on everyone else. I stopped knowing how to make my own decisions because my choices, they were never really mine. They were always based on everyone else, and slowly, I started losing sense of myself. As time passed, I started questioning this. Why is this so hard for me? Why can everyone else say no, but I can't? I was curious to know the amount of yeses I actually said a day. So I kept track in a little notebook, which I have with me here today. And this is what my page looked like. Yes. This was the amount of yeses I said every single day for a week. I told myself, this can't be normal. There has to be some type of reason behind it. So I started looking for answers. I began researching, and that's when I realized something really important. This wasn't just me. There's actually a psychological reason behind it. As humans, especially teenagers, we feel the deep need to be accepted, to belong, to be liked, because our brains are just wired that way. In fact, psychologists describe social acceptance as one of our most basic human needs. And as teenagers, that feeling gets even stronger because the part of our brain in charge of emotional regulation and decision making, the prefrontal cortex, is still developing. So pressure, judgment, and rejection can feel much more intense to us. And when someone asks us for something, our brain doesn't just sense a request, it senses a risk. The risk of not being enough, the risk of disappointing someone. And neuroscience studies actually show that social rejection activates the part of the brain called the anterior cingulate cortex, which also happens to be the same part of the brain associated with physical pain. So when we feel like we've let someone down, it doesn't just feel uncomfortable. Our brain takes it as if we've actually been physically hurt. And since our brain is trying to protect us from that pain, it pushes us towards the safer option, saying yes. Fight or flight. But there's another response not quite talked about enough. Fawn, which according to psychologists means we try to please others to avoid conflict or rejection. We say yes, not because we truly want to, but because it feels safer, safer than risking someone's reaction. And in the moment, it does work. It avoids awkwardness, it avoids tension. But psychologically, this creates a dangerous pattern because our brain learns, if I say yes, I stay accepted. If I say yes, I avoid conflict. So it repeats the behavior again and again and again until it just becomes automatic. And this constant self-abandonment builds stress, burnout, and a loss of identity, which is what happens to a lot of us without even realizing it. But then, something changed. I realized something important. My yes should have value. It shouldn't come from fear, and it shouldn't be automatic. It should feel right to me too. Because if I'm constantly saying yes to other people while ignoring myself, then what does that yes actually mean? And then I realized something that completely changed the way I viewed myself. Every time I was saying yes to other people, I was saying no to myself. No to my time, no to my energy, no to what I actually needed. So I started small. I started setting boundaries, even when they felt uncomfortable. And part of setting those boundaries meant learning to say no. So I forced myself to think before responding to someone. Instead of immediately saying yes, I'd ask myself, do I really want this, or am I just afraid of disappointing someone? And over time, I learned to say, no, I can't today, or sorry, I have stuff to do. And even though those words felt wrong to even come out of my mouth, and the main thing I felt was guilt, the more I practiced, the more I realized saying no didn't make me a bad person. It just meant I was finally listening to myself. And something that really helped me was creating an agenda. Not just for my time, but to help me pay attention to my decisions. So I started paying attention to every yes again, and I took note in a notebook. Which ones came from kindness and which ones came from fear? And this time, this is how my page looked. And slowly, I noticed things started to change. I created space. Space for school, space for others, but also, most importantly, space for myself. Because prioritizing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. And when you learn to do that, others around you learn to as well. At the beginning of this talk, I mentioned Yes Man, a movie about a man whose life changed when he learned how to say yes. But my story was different. My life started changing when I learned to say no. Because when your yes loses honesty, it loses meaning. And sometimes, learning to say no is the first time you truly say yes to yourself. Thank you.